This video will demonstrate the use of the schedule of values function. I'm going to create a contract, and this name would generally be PO number or whatever from the contractor. If we know the tax information, we can fill that out here. If we've already put it into the job, this would pre-populate with the job's information. We're going to add an item, and I'm just copying and pasting out of an existing spreadsheet that we have. And here it's asking me to enter the budgetary information. We're going to skip that because we're going to paste it from the spreadsheet. And this contract actually has two major breakouts. So we'll do 168. And again, we're going to skip entering the budget information. In reality, I would want to break out things which needed to be tax exempt as their own line items. I am going to copy and paste from this spreadsheet. And I'm going to do the same thing for the sleep center space. And this had a couple of blank line items, so we're going to delete those. And the next thing that we would expect our estimators to do is to establish the end date with whatever information they have. So let's just say in this case that the estimator expected that the end date for these items would be August 24th. And because it's so early in the process, they're not particularly confident in that date, so they're going to call it 10%. This stuff is a little later. And we'll say that the entire sleep center is expected to be done September 7th. And that one we're more confident in. All right. That's the point at which I would expect it to be turned over to the project manager. So when we click on this job now, we can see it has contract totals, budgetary cost, labor budgets. I don't expect the project managers to spend a lot of time inside the contract editor. You can do everything you need to from here, but we have this schedule of values function, and they can view only their own jobs. Also, we can select any given job and view the schedule of values just for that job. We can group these items by the invoice item they're attached to. So see, this is hospice and home care, and this is sleep center space. That's fine. That's a good way to look at it. This is basically a project management tool for the PMs. Now you see this little red slash here. We do need to tell it how many working days it's going to take to produce these items. Now, when you're editing a budget item, we have a little drop down that can pre-populate. There's a setting that controls what these values are, so these can be created actually even by facility. We're going to ignore that for right this minute. We can also change these in bulk. So I would expect the first thing a PM to do is to go through and, depending on the type of work listed, put in a estimate of the number of working days. And you'll see now we have a required start by date. So this is a management tool. If this work hasn't been released into the shop by this date, then we have a problem. Now, these working days is a number of calendar days that you could expect to have the product produced and available after you release the work into the shop. Another way of looking at this is by status. So as a PM, once I've put all these onto a set of shop drawings, I can give them status that these are in drafting. And this is another management tool, because let's just say that as time goes on, the drafters, return them to the PM. We can keep track of that. We can say, let's go back to grouping by invoice item. We can say the sleep center space we've gone ahead and submitted. And you can see how it becomes easy to tell what stuff still needs to be submitted, which isn't. You can look at this on your entire company basis and figure out where your bottlenecks are. Now, as these things have gone back, let's just say that they've come back, and we'll say that these are all approved, and these need to be redlined. Just from this data that we've collected so far, if we go to reporting, under scheduling, there's this scheduling report. We can actually see, and this is by hours, but we can look at it by revenue too if we'd like, what status these are in. We can see that of work that's expected to be completed in August, 115 hours worth is still in drafting. So I would consider that a problem at this point. Alright, so if I'm a PM, I have some other filters. So I can switch to the mode to show me just things that I need to add to tasks. These are things that are not released to the shop yet. And of course, for me right now, that's everything. I didn't mention this. We can turn on show details. And if we do, clicking on items will show us information about that item, including a history and when the status has changed. We can also edit these items in place. So if I turn that on, I can click right here and I can change the finish date or the confidence percent or the number of calendar days or the number of hours. We're going to turn that off for now. So as a PM, I have these items back which are approved. I may want to release these into production. Actually, before we do that, this CABEST is one large bulk item that contains way too many different scope areas in it. I can click on this and I can split this budget item. And I can split 25% of it into a new budget item. And you'll see we have this now. I could edit this. I could say, and I could split this again. I would probably want to split up some of these larger ones just to ensure that it's easy to break down onto tasks, but you don't have to, and I'll show you that in a minute. So again, going back to where it just was, here's a list of items that need to be released into production. And I didn't show you this, but if we group by status instead of by item, you can see which items are in drafting, which ones are approved, and which ones have been returned. So we might want to take these. Oh, I'm sorry, not those. This. And release these onto a work order. So from here, I'm going to add to task. Now I could add to an existing task, but probably not going to be. So we'll select a new task. I do have to fill out a category. So these are cabinets. And you'll see I have my list of budget items here. And right from here I can do all the same stuff I can do elsewhere. There's one extra column here, which is percent on task. So this task is expected to fulfill 100% of each of these line items. Now if that's not true, we can simply tell the system about it. Let's say this one task is going to fill 50% of this cabinets for level 1. Alright, so we would attach our work order document, which we'll do that. And Just like anywhere else, we can attach from Outlook by dragging and dropping, or from the clipboard, or scanning, or taking a picture. In general, you're not going to be doing any of that though. We're just going to attach this. And we'll just call this work order drawings. And yes, I want to delete the original file. Release date is pre-populated to today. We can enter a completion date. So if I look here, these all have a completion date by 9/7. We'll go ahead and put that in. On floor date is the date at which this is expected to be on the floor. We're going to leave that alone. That's something production will fill out later for us. And then RPM, simply select the correct production routing for the facility where it's going to be produced. And they save it. It's going to ask them if they want to print a cover sheet. They're going to say no. Do they want to create a shipment? The answer is yes. And we could add the job site address, which we haven't filled out, that kind of a thing. It's already pre-populated the date as a scheduled date. I could say this is more estimated. It's also added a task output item for the task cabinets, which means that as cabinet vision profiles are brought in and assemblies are attached, they'll automatically populate. As items are added as description items to the task, they'll automatically pre-populate. So this is a safe way to have the task created and know that it's going to contain everything actually done in the task. And now when we return to the add to task view, you'll notice the items which were 100% on a task are now gone. So if I just look at all budget items, these items are 100% on a task and they do not show up on the to add to tasks view. Now I could say we need one more task to complete this. And it pre-populated the 50% here. We're not going to create a shipment yet. So this view as a PM is a list of all of my areas of scope that still require release to the shop floor. And of course, production management can use that to identify candidate work. I can come in and find out items that have been returned and are redlining and follow up with a PM to find out where we are on this. We could have items we could have a status created where we are waiting on field information, that kind of a thing. So as a production manager, I could come in and say, okay, what are we waiting on here? Find it, and let's get it done. Now, the next thing that happens is our production management uses the tasks dashboard, and they view the production Des Moines routing. And unfortunately, they've been leaving this stuff at 99% because they like having this list here. But the way it's intended to work is, let me just get this here so that they don't actually do anything with this. Ignore this. Okay. Is that what would happen next is our production management would look at the drawings, decide what needs to happen next. So in our case, this needs to go to engineering. And I don't know if you're aware of this. You can measure from this view. So if we know that the scale is 1/2 inch equals a foot, it is possible to take a measurement on here. That's the built-in PDF viewer, which opens if your workstation doesn't have another PDF viewer. But they would simply edit this, add the next routing step, which is engineering, and they would complete their step. Let's also and they would do the same thing here. And let's just say if this wasn't an item that required engineering, it was simply going to be handed out to the shop floor, they would just add that routing. and they would complete their step. Therefore, this production routing serves as a queue, which should only contain items that require processing. Now again, they're not using it like that here right now, but they will. They liked having one list location that showed them everything that had been released to them. But that's why we've added this multiple routings mode, where they can select just the routings they want to see, the ones that are actually production shop floor routings. And from this one view, they can see all released tasks and where they're at on the shop floor, and what they look like with regard to their due dates. And also, just while I'm here, I'll mention, from this view, you can actually edit the date required and the on-floor date. So the next thing that would happen is, in our engineering example, let's go by assignee, because I didn't actually assign this to anyone. If the Well, actually, let's return over here. Let's go view it from this mode. If we return to our schedule of values, we view all budget items. We can see these are on tasks. And if I right click on one of these, I actually have a tasks with this item menu from which I can access the task menu. So we're just going to add an example of what this might look like. Yeah, that's fine for now. So once engineering is complete, it would return with extra routings. And we can start to see that there's completion showing up for these items. And the reason for that is, even though right now I actually don't want completion showing up, the reason why it's showing these budget items as partially completed is because of the completion of routings. Now we can actually go in and set a routing as does not count towards task completion. And I believe that engineering would be one that should not does not count towards task completion. So we're gonna change that and recalculate. And now you'll notice that all of these have returned to 0% completion. But what will happen is, as completion is recorded against this task, and for routings that complete CNC sheets or assemblies, that completion increments automatically when those items are completed. Otherwise, it requires the user to specify that they've completed it. But it does show up on the user's time clock until they do complete it. So if we have a shop floor employee who's tracked some time to a task, they're going to have a checkbox on their time clock screen right up until they mark it off as done. So if this is marked as 50% complete, again, you'll notice completion proceeding. Now this one doesn't show the same completion percent because if you recall, I only put half of it on that first task. So as a PM, I can see my scope items and how they are proceeding on the shop floor. Now, next thing that's going to happen is I might want to look at it on a to bill mode. And this shows me any scope items which have completion that's less than their billable percent. And so if I'm a PM and I'm doing this on my regularly scheduled time of the month or the week or however often you want to do this, I'm going to enable edit in place mode. And I'm simply going to set this one to 50% and this one to 25. And maybe I know that I can bill a little more on this one than I'm complete, and that's fine. And maybe I know, even though this shows 50%, I can only bill 25 for some reason. That's fine too. Okay, let's go back to all now. And you'll notice these don't show up as to bill anymore because their billable percent is at least their completion percent. So when I return to my to bill mode, I only see the ones that require me to look at them. For example, this one, where I've said to bill 25%, but it's 50% done. If you're doing a revenue recognition method, like percent complete, you could use the to recognize function, which is the same, only it's the recognized field instead of billable. And that's actually where I think that the process would end for our project managers. I expect that the next steps would be done by accounting in our organization. So accounting is going to pull up, jobs to invoice here, and they're going to look at it in the view to invoice, and they're going to multiple select the items. They're going to right click, and they can create an invoice from them. And they could, same normal process as usual. They can select it as ready to send. It'll show up in accounting for sending and entry in accounting. But now there's no longer any items on here that need to be invoiced. And I can simply see that these items, they're yellow because they're partially completed. They're invoiced. So let's go ahead and do one more. We're just going to edit this task that these are on and record progress. And we're going to say, you know what? Now they're done. And you'll see a lot of greens showed up. And as a PM, when I'm in my to bill mode, I'm going to see all these are done. Or, of course, I could always also do it like this. And you'll see a lot of green. And when our accountant comes in the to invoice mode, they'll see all these that have suggested invoice amounts. They can simply create another invoice. Now let's go look at what those invoices look like. I have two invoices now. And if I print this invoice, I have a selection for an AIA method. You'll see a normal AIA G702, right? And a schedule of values. Now, these are the item names. We won't always want to itemize these out like this. Let's look at the next one. And we can control how those itemize out. If we can do it from either place, but I chose to come into the contract editor. If I don't want reception 101 listed separately, I simply uncheck itemize. And what happened there was the actual copied and pasted data added up to $1 more than the price we put down in total. I don't know how we ended up doing that, but we did. So I'm going to multiple select some of these. We're going to edit them, and we're going to unitemize all of these. Now, a invoice is a snapshot of all the data at a time. In general, changes that happen to items after that won't change what prints because we want to see what we actually invoiced at the time without regard to later changes. This is one exception to that, the itemized selection. Well, I take it back. I guess it's not an exception currently, but it was intended to be, and it's going to be once I get done after this video fixing it. So if I come down, let me make sure that's correct. Let's take the cabinets, and we're going to elect not to itemize those. Oh, all right. So what's happened here? this task that we created did not have a completion date that these are on. And any changes, we'll go demonstrate this in a minute. Changes to these will automatically update the task completion date, which will fire off an email. Oops, I forgot to unitemize that. Let's go reprint. Oh, yep. So I will change that so that changes to the itemized selection are not part of the snapshot. Let's go back into the schedule of values and just show you what happens. So this is on 2 tasks. They each have 50%. Both of those tasks had the 9/7 date. If I'm a PM and I've already put these on tasks and I come back through and I change the completion date, to a day earlier, it will automatically update the task completion dates. And the PM and production management through a setting and any engineers who have already worked on it will automatically get emails notifying them of the change. Oh, I was going to show you the emails, but I've got too many coming in. Same thing does happen though if in the tasks dashboard mode we change the date required, which is only available from modes that show tasks and not task steps. If I change that date, it'll fire off an email to all the interested parties. Last thing we're going to show, we're going to have some changes come in. So let's just say here that we have a change come into this reception 101. We can add a change, and we'll say that it's a total change, net change. Well, actually, we'll just leave it as 0, just to demonstrate another thing. And it is PR number 17, change reception 101 to stone. Right. And you'll notice it's automatically selected the item type as a change type. It's asking me to confirm the price. The answer is yes. Now, we can select which budget item it changes. And this is kind of a painful way to do it because you'd have to select it from a list. But you could. We could do that. I'm not going to. I'm simply going to close this. And so now I have this $0 item in here. I can go find the original item. I can right click and I can create a change. A good way to do it would be like this. We'll completely deduct it. And you'll see it's pre-populated all of the values. All I have to do is hit save. Okay. Get rid of that. And it's asked me that it's warned me that the total of the scheduled value of all of the budget items for this item do not add up to what the total is. So it wants to know if I want it to change it. The answer is yes. So now you'll see this is a deduct of that. But we'll add one more change. New value for reception 101. And I'm just going to go look at what it was originally. We'll say, the budget material cost is, say, $6,000, 350 hours. So we now have a deduct of $6,000 and an add of $10,000-ish. So in total, the budget value for this is $3,833. That's how changes are done. And whenever we look at this item, we'll see 2 changes to it. And we can actually right-click and go down to Budget Items Changing This and access the menu items for those particular things. Now, when we're in the Schedule of Values, you'll see changes to budget items, to other budget items, do not show up as a line item here, because they don't exist as individual line items. They're simply changes to this line item. In contrast, oops, that is not at all what I wanted to do. Yes, okay. Oh. Just to mention, this is a rich text field, so you can even copy and paste images, but you can give it different fonts, and this is intended to be, a more detailed description of scope. We never did cover this. What this will allow you to do is break up these hours into individual work cells by percent. So I could say that 600 hours is, 25% or whatever number belongs to CNC time. We're not going to use that though. We're just going to save. Oh, I kind of skipped over the important part there. Because this line item is not a change to another one, but is just new scope, it will show up as an item requiring scheduling right here. 21. And it doesn't have a status. It runs through the same process as anything else. We can look at just the things that need to be added to tasks, and it'll show up here. Okay, I think that covers the basics. There's obviously more here that we could get into, but this is a pretty good start. So, thanks.